They'll blanket you in Wi-Fi and profit off the radiation. Congregation collecting the people for that Satan. I keeps it blazing, cause I can read between the lines. I ain't blind, we unwind what they're really saying. Genetically modify what you're tasting. Don't need that college promise, so now you live up in your mom's basement. Redesign time so your mind is always wasted. Programmed to crave the basics. Keep the beta in stasis. Pay the state, kid. You're in debt for being born. Messengers are more than just the price for being warned. Don't be alarmed, disconnect from their machinations. Stop subscribing to the folly of all nations. Bone breaking ain't the answer, cause they seek the ownership of souls. Spread the seeds and watch them grow. Break the chains of control. Break the chains of control.
Sweet eternal balance of all that is good, true, and beautiful, friends. Tonight, Rogueways is excited to host another author of fictionalized thrillers, taking the readers through the basics and even some mysteries hidden behind humanity's obsession with, reflection within, and unveiling of the stars and our progress through the ages, encoded often and throughout history in the guise of astrotheology. Our ability to codify the heavens into personified narrative and religions. And the man with the plan is Micah Dank. Micah, thank you for bringing your craft to Rogueways. It's exciting to finally connect with you.
Glad we finally got through with this.
Yeah, I don't know if the listeners know, but we've been trying to pull this off for a while now, and it's finally working. Fingers crossed.
Yes.
But before we get started, I do want to remind all the Rogue Warriors out there that there is a new show, Middle Path, and that is on Rockfin on Thursdays at 7 p.m. Mountain. Same place, same time, just a different place. So come check out the new show over there on Rockfin. You get so many shows actually when you're over on Rockfin. There's so much content. There's Sam Tripoli, there's Slow News Day, there's Charlie Robinson. There's a million people over there, and I keep learning more and more people as I go, and it's an awesome place to be a part of. And so come support Rogueways in the new venture with Middle Path there. Really, we're just trying to pull away all the new age garbage from our true spiritual path. It exists. It's just been coded in a bunch of bullshit. So Middle Path is all about giving us that practical, realistic application of our deeply spiritual truth. And so go get in touch with that. And also always rogueways.org. It's where you can grab tarot readings. It's where you can get guided sessions. It's where you can get signed books from me with a unique inscription and just so much more, Organite and all kinds of stuff. So go head over to rogueways.org. It's the hub of all the things. And finally, Micah, I like to ask the pointless question of the episode every time. And for you, I was wondering, what, if you had to choose from any time period in history that we know of, or maybe even ones we don't, which time period is your favorite and why?
I would go back to the time of Atlantis.
Yeah.
Probably.
That's why I was like, maybe ones we don't know for sure too. That'd be where I probably want to go as well.
I like that question.
Yeah. What do you like about Atlantis?
I just like the idea, just the crystal technology, just the stories behind it, the mythology, everything. It seems like a really advanced place that we just lost to history.
Yes, I know. It'd be nice to live in like a techno utopia instead of a techno dystopia like we seem to be headed towards. But I keep hoping we can pull it off, and that's the middle pathway. But maybe, Micah, you could take us back. I always like to just get an idea of like where you started and how you ended up where you are. So what was young life like for little Micah?
So I was raised in a religious household, and I never took to it ever. Since I was a child, I never took to it. And I was looking for answers. And then I had a friend move into the neighborhood who I'm still very good friends with. And his family were born again Christians. And so I would look at, my religion growing up and theirs, and I'd be like, well, who's right? Somebody should be right. Somebody's got to be right. Are we all wrong? I wrestled with it for a little bit. And then I came across, fast forward 30 years, fast forward 20 years, I came across Jordan Maxwell and Santos Spinocchi about astrotheology, and they really gave me the answers I was looking for. So I started researching them and learning about them and studying what they talk about. And I realized that I had to write something about this. And I initially wanted to write a nonfiction book, But then I thought to myself, I'd be able to get away with a lot more if I put them in fiction books, because that seems to be how it works, is you're allowed to talk truth in fiction. So that's what I did. I wrote 6 thrillers. It took me a couple of years to get an agent, and then it took me a couple more years to get a book deal. But now book 3 is out. Book 4 is coming out March 15th.
Whoop, whoop.
Yep. And it's basically just hidden codes that I've discovered. In the Bible, they make up the because my books are very Dan Brown Da Vinci Code like.
Yeah,
with
that's fun.
With cryptograms and anagrams, but the cryptograms and anagrams are biblical. See, in my world, in the books that I've written in my world, the evil entities use astrotheology against the humans without them knowing.
Ah, I like this.
So
twist.
basically, they have to uncover it. So, and as far as I know, I'm the only one who's writing about this topic in this way.
Yeah, it's interesting because I'm similar to you. I write fiction, and I feel the same, that like I'm writing these fictional novels, but they're actually my perception of what's like pretty realistic. You know, and I think like you're right, you can get away with a bit more, not just because you know, maybe more people will kind of pick it up and read it and not really understand necessarily your sort of ulterior motives, but also because you can embed, you know, like it's a lot harder to describe reality sometimes than it is to be able to show it in fictionalization and like really get that across better. So that's cool that you landed on the same truth. What is it? I was just watching, I think it was it was American Gods. Have you watched this? It's a Neil Gaiman thing, and he has this character that just says it's actually Thoth, or Toth, however people pronounce it. I say Thoth, and Thoth is always saying like sometimes truth is truer than true, or fiction is truer than truth, or something. And I'm like, it's really true. It's really true.
It's true. It's 100%.
Yeah, so that's fun.
Just look at like 1984. Not to beat a dead horse, but look at 1984.
Yeah, and you couldn't have just written this as this like dry, so I mean you could, but way less people would have connected to it than if you gave it to us in this fictional form where we could imagine, like, oh man, what if it gets to this point? And now we're like, oh shit, it's kind of at that point.
Yeah, that's exactly right. That's literally why I did it.
So you really found all these codes deeply embedded in the Bible, right?
True, yes. Because once you understand astrotheology, once you understand what each sign represents, then you could just pluck it out of the Bible, and then you could just show how it is there. And you know, I've done the book of Matthew, I've done Revelation, I've done the book of Enoch, I've done there's a Gnostic text called the book of Raziel. All Gnostic texts and everything can be put through the same ring.
So cool. Yeah, and I feel like the Gnostics are like a little bit more open kind of about it than like Christianity maybe might be about those like parallels and how these things connect. Well, let's just really quick, because I know our audience, we have a lot of people who are super familiar with Santos Bonacci, and he's been on Rogue before, and this idea of astrotheology, but let's give us your best sort of description of what that even means for the people who are like, what the hell are they talking about?
So astrotheology, the best way I could describe it is it's the mythology of the Zodiac and the constellations.
And one of my favorite examples, and this is because it's the first one that I learned personally, has to do with Jesus, the cross, and you know what that has to do with Christmas. Do you want to describe that for people, just to give a good example?
Yeah, I can give an example for that. So Jesus, the cross, and the Christmas. So you have your zodiac wheel, which everybody's familiar with. If you draw a perfect cross, you basically have the solstices and the equinox, and they form a perfect cross. That's the cross of God's Son. The sun rises a degree every day on its axis. So picture the zodiac wheel. It'll rise a degree. It'll hit June 21st, and then for 3 days, it'll stay that way. And then it'll drop a degree on June 25th. It'll continue to drop a degree until it hits December 21st, which is the lowest point. So they would say God's Son was dead. And then for 3 days afterwards, it would rise at the same point. So God's Son was dead for 3 days. And then on December 25th, you have Osiris, you have Horus, you have Dionysus. All these gods are born on December 25th because the sun rises a degree, and that's why it's Christmas.
He is risen.
Yep.
Yeah, and I know that for a lot of like kind of hardcore fundamentalist Christians, that's like I mean, it's kind of a deal breaker in a way because you like can't deny that those things line up, right? And you're like, the terminology is the same, like the story is the same. But I also know, for me at least, I look at that and I'm like, that's still beautiful. That's still an amazing experience that we have as humans, noticing these patterns and seeing them repeat and, describing them in story. And there's nothing wrong with that, So, I don't know. I love it. So that's one that I think a lot of people are familiar with, but you have uncovered so much more than that.
I have. Should I just assume? Well, no, let me not do that because I'm going to go through the 12 signs and tell you what to look for.
Yeah.
And then I'll start decoding things.
No, I think that's great because I think I don't, what I just described to you is sort of, and what we've already talked about is, my surface level of understanding of things. And I'm sure a lot of people are there too. So the more you teach us, the better.
All right. So I start with Aquarius, even though the year begins in Aries. The first sign is Aquarius that I talk about, which is represented by the man with the water pitcher. The second sign is Pisces that I talk about, which is the sign of the two fish in the water. Then you have Aries, which is the ram. And in Aries, you have March 21st, which is the spring equinox. It's a 12-hour day, 12-hour night. It's also the same time in Aries, you have the Passover for the Jews, or the passing over of the sun over the equator and back on its way up to its height in the summer solstice. In Christianity, the passing over is changed and becomes the resurrection of God's son as Easter. So it's two separate things that mean the same thing.
But we also call it Passover.
Right.
Right?
The passing over, Passover, exactly. It's why the Jews smear the lamb's blood on the door in Exodus to protect them from God smiting all the Egyptian firstborns. It's why they have a lamb bone on the Passover plate. It's why the Jews blow the ram's horn at the sky, because they're the people of Aries. Interestingly enough, you're talking about Abraham being the father of the Jews. Abraham, or Abram as he's called in Hebrew, is a combination of two words, Abba, which means father, and Ram, which means ram. Father Ram. So they're the people of Aries. Okay.
Like literally they're just describing their descent, their familial line.
Exactly. So then Taurus is the bull. And when you see the sky, you see the Taurus, you see the bull. You know that you need to put the plow on the bull on earth and plow so that you can harvest in Virgo and Libra.
That makes so much sense too, because sometimes I'm like, why this shape? I look at these stars and I'm like, I guess you could draw anything and just connect these dots in whatever way you want, because some of them I'm like, that does not look like that to me. Oh, like Orion I see, an archer, I get it. But like some of them I'm like, how is this a bear? Like what? But it makes sense, like what you're describing, that you would, okay, this shape we're going to remember it's the bull so that we remember this is the time that we do this thing.
Absolutely. So Gemini is the twins. Cancer is the crab, which is the sideways moving creature. And so I already talked to you about the sun rising a degree every day for 3 days. It sits just June 21st for 3 days. It stays at that height. So it technically moves sideways. That's the summer solstice.
Very interesting.
In the ancient times, the crab was actually the scarab in the Egyptian times.
That's why sometimes they're kind of interchanged, I guess.
Right. Well, you get the word crab from scarab anyway.
True.
Yeah. And so Leo is the king of the jungle, basically, the lion. The ruling planet of Leo is the sun. So when they're talking about Jesus being in his kingdom, they're talking about the sun in Leo. Then Virgo is the woman holding the wheat stalk. This is important for two reasons. Number one, because it represents the Virgin Mary, the virgin birth, because Virgo's the virgin and it's the only woman sign in the zodiac. And it's holding a wheat stalk because you plant in Taurus and then the virgins would cultivate the wheat in Virgo to make the bread. That's when it'll have grown. Then Libra is basically the justice. It's the scales. It's the just one. And the reason it's the justice is because it has the fall equinox in Libra. And that's where God's son is judged by Libra in the scales and sent and condemned to death. Okay, he's got to go to Scorpio, Sagittarius. The Jews always celebrate the New Year's in Libra. I'm sorry. The Jews always celebrate the New Year in Libra, and because Libra is the scales, it's the balance, it's the just one, it's the judger, it's the judgment. That's why the Jews have the Yom Kippur, which is the Day of Atonement, where they're being judged, and God puts them in the book of life, or he doesn't, for another year. Libra is also the wine season. So basically you plant in Taurus and then you could press the wine in Libra. Then Scorpio is the scorpion, and he's known as the betrayer. And the reason he's the betrayer is because when a scorpion bites you, it leaves an imprint in your skin that looks like a pair of lips. It looks like two lips. That's where the mafia gets the kiss of death from. That's the phrase. And it's why Jesus was betrayed by Judas with a kiss, because Jesus is the son and Judas is Scorpio. That's why it had to be a kiss that he betrayed him with. He didn't point him out in a crowd. He didn't do any of that. He was a kiss. So the sun is judged in Libra and betrayed in Scorpio. Then finally in Sagittarius, with the bow and the arrow, finally kills the sun. Now in the Bible, the bow and the arrow gets translated to a spear going into the side.
Yeah.
Okay, which I will show you the passage where that happens. And this is where the sun dies on December 21st. So whenever they're talking about death or Jesus's death or death is December 21st. Okay. And then Capricorn is the goat. And those are basically the 12 signs.
Yeah. So this is so interesting too, to think about, because for me, if you were trying to teach me like the stars and what happens and when to do things, and you were like, okay, you can remember Scorpio because like it leaves this kiss mark when it bites you, I'd be like, whoa, what the hell? Like I cannot remember all this. But I imagine at the time that people were putting this all together and encoding it and turning it into these narratives, I imagine so that they could teach each other and pass it down more easily. And maybe you have a different idea about why. I'm not sure. I'd love to hear about it. But I imagine then like a lot more people in their region did know that a Scorpio bite leaves this kiss mark, and did know that like the Virgin makes bread or whatever, these things would be a lot more common. And now it's just like this weird puzzle to us because we're not connected to the land, we're not connected to the earth, and we don't have these lived experiences that we share together. Do you think that is why they created these narratives and stories and codes, is to teach?
Well, they borrowed it. They were passed down.
Right.
So they were created, the Jewish Bible basically comes from the Egyptian Book of the Dead.
Right.
Or the Egyptian Bible, which goes back to the Sumerians. It's all borrowed. It's the same story though.
Right.
What I just told you was the only story that's ever been told. It's the same story through every god.
I totally see that. And that's one of the things I loved about astrotheology is you're like, oh, every single tradition in the world basically encodes these same things. And we can, jump off that and go into all sorts of other things they also encode, but they're all the same thing over and over again. But that's what I mean. Do you think that the original, like the first people who were like, okay, let's tell these stories, let's encode this, do you think that it was just for teaching, like when you harvest and when you plant and when you do these things?
Yeah, it was encoded. The Bible was never meant to be taken literally. That only happened in 325 AD with Constantine, the Council of Nicaea, where Constantine condensed everything into Christianity. From then forward, it was taken literally. But Constantine had a nephew named Julian the Apostate, who, after Constantine died, tried to bring everyone back to sun worship, because that's what Christianity was. Original Christians were known as Helio-Gnostics, which is Helio, which is the sun, and Gnostics, which is knowing or knowers, sun worshipers. So they were sun worshipers. Jesus is worshipped on the sun day. I mean, they make it obvious. Any picture of Jesus, he always has the sun behind his head. They make it 100% obvious. They just encode it. They hide it, because if you were in the know, you were able to figure this out. But it was never meant to be taken literally.
And it's very convenient to have when you can morph these traditions that everyone already relates to into a system that is, a lot more top down and controlling. That makes it really easy to manage people. Yeah. So
I'm going to go into some of the stuff that I've decoded.
Please do.
Mind.
Yeah, that'd be fascinating.
Right. Have you heard, and you haven't heard me on any podcast before, have you?
I haven't. And I don't know that many of my audience has either. They may have, but take us like we have never. All
right, good. So have you heard of the phrase pride comes before the fall?
I guess maybe. No, not specifically that I can remember. It sounds kind of familiar, but I don't know.
It's from the Bible. It's biblical. I think it's Proverbs 16:18. If I were to ask you what you think pride comes before the fall, if you were to translate it literally, what would you say it would mean?
Like, if you're too proud and you're acting like an arrogant asshole, you're going to fall and it's going to suck for you.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. But do you know what a group of lions is called?
A pride.
Yes.
Ah.
So pride is lions. That's Leo. Leo's in July and August. That comes before the fall.
Wow. That's awesome.
Also, in the book of Micah, he predicts that a savior will come from a town in Israel called Bethlehem. Does that sound familiar to you?
Yes.
Bethlehem in Hebrew is a combination of two words. It's bet, which means house, and lechem, which means bread, house of bread. Well, the house of bread is Virgo, lady with the wheat stalk. So he's basically saying the savior will come from a virgin if you read it in coding.
Interesting. Are you sharing more? I was just pausing.
Yeah.
Okay.
No, I'm sorry. It's okay. I mean, you can go through his nicknames too. You know, you have Capricorn, which is the goat. He's known as the scapegoat of Israel. You have the man sign in Aquarius. He's known as the son of man. You have Pisces, the two fish. He's known as the fisherman of men. It's also why he feeds the masses with two fish. Right?
Yeah. So these are all just the nicknames of the
Jesus.
sun. But I mean, the sun as it goes through all the signs.
You have the ram in Aries. He's known as the Lamb of God. You have Leo, the lion. He's known as the Lion of Judah. The lady holding the stalk of wheat is Virgo. He's born of a virgin, and he's known as the bread of life. Libra is the scale of justice. He's known as the just one. You know, and then he's worshipped on the Sunday.
Yeah.
You know, you can go through the Zodiac signs, and there's a nickname for him everywhere.
It makes so much sense, especially like we were talking about before, when you look at all these other, you know, Jesus-like figures all around the globe over and over again that have all the same characteristics and all the same days associated, all the same things. And it's like, well, yeah, because we're all looking at the same sky and describing the same thing. And it's just interesting that got used against us so specifically. Are there like the same sorts of things that could apply to, you know, like the devil or Satan or Lucifer or these types of beings? Yeah.
Of course, Lucifer is the morning star. He's known as the light bearer.
Right.
In Genesis 1:3, God says, let there be light. How are you going to have light without the light bearer, the light bringer? So Lucifer is immediately mentioned in the Bible, if not by name, then by action. And as far as Lucifer goes, he's the morning star. Well, you know what the morning star is?
Venus.
It's Venus. Do you know why it's the morning star?
Because it's the brightest light in the sky that besides the sun and moon.
Exactly. So when the sun is coming up in the early morning, you'll look straight ahead and you'll see a bright shining light. That's Venus. That announces the arrival of God's son. His pentagram, Lucifer has a pentagram. The pentagram, if you take Earth and you take Venus and you go around the sun.
Like a spirograph.
For a year, it almost touches at 5 places. You just connect the dots, you get the pentagram.
Which, that blows my mind that they were mapping this out that specifically to be able to mention that, you know. But how does that become evil then? Because nothing about that sounds evil.
It becomes perverted. I do a thing, maybe we can get into it a little bit later or another time, but I do a thing where I talk about all the Illuminati hand symbols.
Yeah.
They're all positive. Like this, they're all positive symbols. They just come, they're just perverted.
Right.
You know, someone decides to take it, much like the Nazis took the swastika.
Right.
The swastika goes back further than Hindu.
Right.
The swastika is literally, if you take a picture of the Big Dipper on the solstices and the equinox and you put them together as they go around Polaris, it makes a swastika.
It's literally what the swastika's from. Yeah. Yeah, and it is. We talk about that a lot here too, how all of this stuff, you know, it's been perverted. And so there's people who are using it for evil, but it's just like anything, right? Like the swastika is a tool. It's a hammer. You can hit people in the face with a hammer, or you can put a nail in the place that it goes with a hammer, and that could be a good tool, right? And it's the same with all of those. I'm totally with you. Do you want to break down some of those hand symbols and get into it, or do you want to go on with some more stuff that you've decoded?
let me see if we have a little bit of time afterwards,
Okay.
but you'll just remind me.
Yeah.
But I'm going to read you a passage from Deuteronomy, and you're going to tell me how many signs you recognize just in it without me decoding it.
All right, you guys in the chat count too.
So we got Deuteronomy 32. He gave them honey from the cliffs and olive oil from the rocky ground. He gave his people butter from the herd and milk from the flock. He gave them lambs and goats. They had the best rams from Bashan and the finest wheat. They drank the best wine made from the juice of red grapes. But Jeshurun became fat and kicked like a bull.
I got at least 10, but I wouldn't have gotten them if you hadn't given me a primer ahead of time. Like the wine one, I wouldn't have associated
That's
with
the
a certain
idea,
sign.
but that's why I do the primer, yeah. That's why you talk about the signs. And then once
Were
you
they-
recognize that,
Yeah.
you notice it.
Were they all in there? Or did I just only catch that many?
Well, there's a couple more. He gave them honey from the cliffs. We didn't go over this real quick, but in Cancer, there's an asterism, which is a group of stars closely knit together called the Beehive Cluster. So that's where the honey comes from. And he gave his people butter from the herd and milk from the flock. Well, that comes from the Milky Way galaxy. Okay, and the Milky Way galaxy center is in Sagittarius. So you got from Cancer to Sagittarius is the land of milk and honey.
Someone else got 10 too. Yeah. Oh, that's the land of milk and honey?
Yeah, from
I did
Cancer
not
to
know that.
Sagittarius, because you have the Beehive Cluster, that's the honey, and you have in Capricorn. I'm sorry, in Sagittarius you have the Milky Way galaxy, or the center of the Milky Way galaxy goes there.
That is so funny. So, but why? I mean, is that because that's the time of the year where you're harvesting and getting all this abundance, or it's totally unrelated to how satiated we are, and it's just a description of what time of year it is?
Yeah,
You know what I
that's
mean?
what it is.
Okay.
Yeah. If we go into the New Testament.
Sorry, just really quick. It is kind of interesting how many of these things do relate directly to our actual lived experience, though. And I mean, I guess like I already said it, we just kind of are projecting that up there and drawing the symbol we want and using it to remember. But I don't know. I want eventually when we get there, I want to get your opinion on whether or not this is some sort of like a grand design, and that's why there's so much coincidence that seems to be built into it, or whether it's literally just us like projecting a system onto the world. But you can answer that now if you want.
I think it's a grand design.
Yeah.
But that's not to say that other galaxies that have other life forms on it don't have their own idea of a zodiac.
True.
You know, this just happens to be ours.
It's like maybe it's like a little bit about like there's a grand design, and then we are also projecting onto it what we can to organize.
Well,
it
let me put it to you this way. Have you heard of the Lascaux Caves?
No, maybe.
Is
that with the
Lascaux
bulls
Caves
drawn on the wall?
Yeah, with the bulls,
Yeah.
the rams, the lions, all the signs of the zodiac.
Oh my
They
god,
found
I've
these
never
caves.
noticed that.
They found these caves in France called the Lascaux Caves. And they went inside and they went deep into it, and they found all these etchings on the wall, the animals we just talked about.
Yeah.
They carbon dated the wall, and it came out to about 40,000 years. And then what they did was they brought in an astronomer and they with a computer, and they rewound the sky back 40,000 years where they were located. And they superimposed the picture that they got, and basically all the animals lined up to where they were supposed to be. So people knew about this science 40,000 years ago. And in fact, even better, on the summer solstice, only one day a year, the sun would actually come into the cave and bounce off the wall.
Wow. Which is like the thing that unites all of these ancient temples and places around the world, is that date and that phenomenon of the light lining up like perfectly. I was just showing some pictures that you couldn't see to the audience of that cave and the paintings in it. I mean, they're profoundly beautiful, you know, especially for 40,000 years old. It's crazy. I never heard that though. That's really cool that it is the all the signs of the zodiac in there, and that it lines up like that. Never heard that before. That's so cool.
So if we go into, let's say, Revelation, the book of Revelation, there's two passages I like to talk about. One is Revelation 4:7, which says the first living creature was like a lion, the second was like an ox, the third had a face like a man, the fourth was like a flying eagle. So you have the lion Leo, the ox Taurus, the face of a man Aquarius, and the fourth was like a flying eagle. In astrology, The scorpion is the belly crawling creature, and it crawls on the floor. It's the lowest form of life, but its evolved form is the flying eagle.
Really?
And then the evolved form of that, it could evolve twice, is the phoenix, which is the story of something that's born and then dies into its own ashes, and then it's reborn. It's the story of Jesus. So the flying eagle is actually Scorpio. So if you take those 4 signs, Leo, Taurus, Aquarius, and Scorpio, those are the 4 fixed signs of the zodiac.
And they're the ones that are always in like esoteric. If you have like a circle and a cross and whatever, and you're going to have 4 symbols, it's going to be those 4 and all sorts of things in like the tarot and all these different places. Mm-hmm. And why is that? The fixed signs.
It's the fixed signs. You have your mutable sign, you have your cardinal sign, you have your fixed sign. It just happens to be the fixed signs. They just happen to put a passage in there. It's not by accident. These 4 animals, or including the man, these 4 creatures are the fixed signs. That was not done by accident. Astrology was well known back then.
And what makes them fixed? Like what's that? Why those 4 signs are fixed? Do you know?
That's a little deeper that goes into it. I'm not 100% sure.
Okay. I wonder if it's like because each of them has a certain astrological phenomenon or something, but I'm not sure either. I wonder if someone listening out there might know, and if so, let us know in the chat. But yeah, I never connected that was the reason those 4 were used in that way.
So I can go into Revelation 12.
Please do.
Which is, have you heard of the woman with the dragon?
Yes, I think everyone listening probably has to.
So I'll read it to you real quick.
Okay.
A great sign appeared in heaven, a woman clothed with the sun, with the moon under her feet, and a crown of 12 stars on her head. She was pregnant and cried out in pain as she was about to give birth. Then another sign appeared in heaven, an enormous red dragon with 7 heads and 10 horns and 7 crowns on its head. Its tail swept a third of the stars out of the sky and flung them to earth. So you have a great sign that appeared in heaven, a woman clothed with the sun. Well, that's just a metaphor for the sun being in Virgo. Okay. And then with the moon under her feet, if the sun's in Virgo, if the sun's out, then the moon's at her feet, right? The moon's under.
Right.
And then another sign appeared in heaven, an enormous red dragon. Have you heard of the constellation Draco before?
Yes.
That's the dragon. Draco's the dragon. Its tail swept a third of the stars out of the sky and flung them to earth. The tail of Draco goes from Aries to Sagittarius, which is a third of the stars in the sky.
Wow. What about throwing them to earth? That's just...
It's a metaphor. It's just a metaphor.
Meaning what?
Well, it's just... I don't know if a metaphor is the proper word, but it's just...
it's like a flourish. They're like, and then it totally threw them to earth. Like, it was fun.
Yeah. That's what I'm looking for, yeah.
Interesting. Yeah, so it makes Revelation a lot less scary when you're like, oh, it's just people describing the sky.
Yeah. There's another one that I like to go into, which is Job 38:32. You familiar with the book of Job?
Yes. Such a sad story.
You want to explain it to your listeners real quick?
The real quick and dirty of Job is that God and Satan made a bet that Job was such like a devoted follower of God that Satan could never do anything to torture him in order to make him abandon God. And God's like, okay, I'll take the bet. And then Satan goes about ruining Job's entire life in like the worst ways possible. And he doesn't betray God. He's still a holy man. So God won the bet. Kind of like a dick move. I'm like, dick move, God. Dick move.
Yeah, but then he gets everything back, right?
True.
He gets everything back in abundance.
True.
So what I'm going to read to you is God's response to Job. Okay. Job is crying out to him. Right? Job is crying out to him, and then God responds. Okay? So he says, this is God's response. He says, can you lead forth the Mazzaroth? The Mazzaroth literally means the Zodiac.
Oh, really?
The Mazzaroth literally means the Zodiac. Over time, it becomes Mazalot, which survives in Judaism today as Mazel Tov, which is good, which means good fortune from the stars. So the Lord's challenge to Job, he says, his first 2 are obvious. He says, can you bind the chains of the Pleiades? Can you loosen Orion's belt? Those are obvious,
Yeah.
right? Then he says, can you bring forth the constellation in their seasons or lead out the bear with its cubs? The constellations are the zodiac above, and the bear and its cubs are Ursa Major, the Great Bear, and Ursa Minor, the Big Dipper, part of the Big Dipper. Then he says, who can tip over the water jars of heaven? That's Aquarius. Do you hunt the prey? Do you hunt the prey for the lioness and satisfy the hunger of the lions? That's Leo. Who provides food for the raven? That's the constellation Corvus, which means raven and borders on Virgo. Do you watch when the doe bears her fawn? That's Mariga, which means deer, M-R-I-G-A, and is located in Orion. Who let the wild donkey go free? That's Asalus borealis, meaning donkey, and is located in Cancer. Will the wild ox consent to serve you? That's Taurus. The wings of the ostrich flap joyfully. That's Lambda Achille or Alpha Liman, which means two ostriches in Arabic. Do you give the horse its strength? It laughs at fear, afraid of nothing. It does not shy away from the sword. The quiver rattles against its side along with the flashing spear and lance. Remember how I mentioned spear before?
Yeah.
That's the Sagittarius with the bow and the arrow. They mentioned spear. In the Bible, there's two very important murders, the two most important murders that involve a spear. The first one is Cain and Abel.
Oh, true.
Cain and Abel. Cain, the name Cain in Hebrew literally means spear. And the second is the murder of Jesus, where how is he finally murdered? He's stabbed in the side with a spear. So
Right.
the spear takes on a very important thing. Does the eagle soar at your command and build its nest on high? Aquila is the Latin name for eagle and is a constellation a few degrees above the celestial equator. Then he says, can you pull in Leviathan with a fish hook? That's the fish Pisces. So his response to Job is, I created all these stars and placed their, do you understand them? Now, if you don't read it that way, he says, can you bring forth the constellation in their seasons or lead out the bear with its cubs? Who can tip over the water jars of heaven? Do you hunt for prey? It just sounds like he's talking about animals and livestock. But when you realize that it's much more than that.
Right. So what about the people who would say, that yes, these things all align with the astrological, but that is part of the, again, like sort of grand design almost, but that it means both. You know how this concept of like, we used to write a lot of texts, especially ancient texts, are written like 3 layers deep. There's like the surface reading, there's like the metaphorical reading, and then there's the coded reading, and that all of them are true, right? What do you think about that concept?
Is that possible? Sure, but all history points to the fact that this was never taken literally until 325.
Yeah.
People are going to say, I've had Christians talk to me before. I have a really good friend who said that he can't deny anything that I'm saying,
right,
but it just strengthens his faith. So I'm like, huh. I mean, faith isn't logical.
Right.
In this kind of stuff, faith isn't logical.
It's never going to be.
It's not. It's something that comes from within, and it just sits with you.
Mm-hmm.
But this is an astrology book to me.
Right. Well,
I'm going to read something to you too. Are you familiar with the Roman Catholic catechisms?
I mean, I know the idea that they exist, but I don't.
You don't know what they're like? The amendments. They're like, after the Bible, and do this, and do this, and do this. I'm going to read you 2116. Okay. All forms of divination are to be rejected, recourse to Satan or demons, conjuring up the dead or other practices falsely supposed to unveil the future, consulting horoscopes, astrology, palm reading, interpretation of omens and lots, the phenomena of clairvoyance, and recourse to mediums all conceal a desire for power over time, history, and in the last analysis, other human beings, as well as a wish to conciliate hidden powers. They contradict the honor, respect, and loving fear that we owe to God alone. So the Catholic Church is telling you, I've just read you 5 things. Like, there's clearly astrology here. But the Catholic Church is clearly telling you, stay away from it.
Yeah. We don't want you to figure anything out. Because it's like I was, just hinting that there's every text of enough antiquity has these multiple layers of meaning, and so we can all take from it what we would like to take from it, and we can take multiple layers of meaning from it, right? So we can see this astrotheological truth, and we can see how that was mirrored in all of these texts and all of these traditions all around the world. And we can also still take from it, like you were saying, our faith, and that doesn't have to diminish any of this. But it's definitely interesting that they don't want us to have the keys, right? They seem to not want us to have the access to decoding some of this, like you were saying, and the decoding that you've done. And like you just read, they're like strict rules against it. But where do you stand on astrology in general? Like, stepping back from all that and just this idea that, where the stars are at a certain point is influencing us here. Do you buy into that, or do you just kind of, it's like a neat thing?
Well, I get my chart read. I get my chart done every year, or actually I get my chart done every time something really good happens to me. I get it read, see if anything has changed.
So you've got a toe in that world too. Do you?
Of course.
Yeah. Do you go sidereal or true sidereal or sort of traditional, or what's your favorite angle?
Just the traditional one, to be honest.
Yeah.
I think
highly suggest you try a true sidereal if you've done a bunch of the other, and just check it out. Just see what your new chart looks like and what it says. Because for me, at least, we've had Athen Commenti on, and I'm like, that was more accurate than anything I've ever experienced in my life. So you might want to try it. It's pretty cool.
Okay.
Just
Hook me up.
for fun. Yeah, we'll go check it out. And so, yeah, what else have you decoded? I love this game.
Well, you could talk about other passages. It's not necessarily astrotheology, but Genesis 32:30. You're familiar with the Eye of Horus, right?
Right.
You're familiar with the Eye of Horus, and how it represents the pineal gland.
Yeah, if you cut the pineal gland in half, or just the brain in half, you see the
If you cut the
Eye of
brain in
Horus.
half and then you open it, you see the pineal. You see it looks like a pine cone.
It's like
the
a
pineal. That's why it's called the pineal gland. Yeah, and then there's a brow ridge above it that kind of looks like an eyebrow, and that's the corpus callosum.
Yes.
So the ancients knew this too. But in Genesis 32:30, it says, "So Jacob called the place Peniel, Peniel, saying, 'It is because I saw God face to face.'" Well, Peniel is literally just pineal. So he's talking about having a DMT experience.
Huh. And like you said, I mean, they knew this, and this is where this symbol comes from, literally, because they cut into brains. They knew they were not just like goat herders in the desert. Understandings and methods. But it's fascinating, because like you're saying, that was a DMT experience. They had to know that this is where this DMT is coming from in our brain, and this is where some of our most profound spiritual experiences are coming from, in order to have wanted to codify it and turn it into this symbol that is everywhere, all over, their scriptures and palaces and whatever.
Yeah, 100%.
So it's not just that they found something neat in the brain. They're like, oh, look, there's a design. Let's draw it on stuff. Like, they understood what it was all about.
You know what else is kind of interesting too?
What's that?
Talking about the pineal gland.
Mm-hmm.
The Buddhists, they mourn death for 49 days. And according to the Tibetan Book of the Dead, okay, the pineal, I'm sorry, the Tibetan Book of the Dead, sorry, I'm getting confused.
No,
it's
you're
late. The Tibetan Book of the Dead, according to the Tibetan Book of the Dead, it takes 49 days for the soul to reincarnate. Well, here's an interesting thing, right? And the Buddhists mourn for 49 days.
Yeah.
It takes 49 days for the pineal gland to become visible in an ultrasound.
Oh.
It takes 49 days. They knew this too.
Weird.
So they say that your soul enters the body at 49 days.
Dude, this could end the abortion debate forever.
Good. I read a really great book one time. It was called The Flicker Men. And not to get too much into quantum theory, basically, but you're familiar with the double slit? No, is it the double slit experiment?
The double slit showed that there could be particles or waves. Both.
Right. So I'm
Yeah.
thinking of the wrong one. I'm thinking of the one which collapses the waveform into a singularity. It's either waves or particles. Oh yeah, that was it.
Yeah, that's a double slit.
That was it. So it's basically the story, this book that I read is about this scientist that recreates it. And it turns out that animals cannot collapse the wave function. So they go into this huge thing. They start shining light into women's uteruses with babies to see if the child has a soul, if they can collapse the wave particle.
Wow.
You know,
Yeah.
it was like crazy intense. Yeah, it's called The Flickerman. It was a pretty good book.
Interesting. That's another one of those things. Fiction can tell us so much. Yeah. So what drew you into wanting to write about all of this? You know, clearly you studied it and decoded all of this first.
I guess sometimes in life, I had never experienced it before, but something just calls to you.
Yeah.
Something just calls to you. And I was like, you know what? I just had an original idea. I was like, let me write thrillers that break down all this stuff.
Yes.
Like I can go into so many. Did you see when I originally pitched you the idea for this show? Did you see that section with how many topics I talk about in my books?
I don't think so.
Oh, I could have swore I sent it to you. I'll have to resend it to you anyway, but it's basically just like the Akashic Records. It's talking about acoustic drilling, sonic levitation, just a ton of different topics that I just meld into this one particular series. And it's just, to me, it's kind of like my codex, I guess. It's my grand design thing. You know, it's kind of like, this is everything that I know, and I'm going to teach it to you in a fun way. That's kind of how I did it.
That is exactly what, you know, what led me to want to write my books also, and the same exact type of totally different story, totally different sort of like, you know, take on things. Mine's not focused on astrotheology at all, but same sort of thing where I'm like, well, here's all of the things that I love and have followed my whole life and researched my whole life and put into a story form so that anybody who wants to can go learn about these things through reading in a really fun way. But also, you know, the story exists as the story. Like that story came from somewhere, you know, to me, and I like have this very deep understanding that some beings at some point lived this story, and I just translated it into this book form for
you know.
people
It's
to
funny
watch
because
or
how
read.
I write is this. What I did was I started writing down. I opened up a Word document and I started writing down trinkets of information that I wanted to put in the stories, and then trinkets became passages, and then passages became like a little bit longer, or I would just write something funny that one of the characters were going to say, right? And so it was just a smorgasbord of shit.
Yeah.
And then what I did was I ended up having like 90 pages. So what I did was I cut it into 6 parts, and I had 15 pages each. And I basically went, all right, chapter 1, I took a highlighter. I want this in it. I printed it out. I want this in it. I want this in it. I want this in it. And then to me, I had this idea. And then once I knew what the information I was going to share in the chapter, then I came up with the storyline. And then what happened, which was amazing, I swear to God, it's incredible, is that as I'm writing this, I know what as I'm writing 1, I know what 2, 3, and 4 are turning into. Okay. And so on and so forth. So when I'm on 4, I know what 5, 6, and 7 are going to be. But by the time I got to 6, it's almost like I was channeling the story because it took a new life and it went a different direction. And I was like, this is not what I planned, but this is what I wrote. So it's kind of like, oh, I guess we're doing this now. So I'd have to come up with something else. You know, it's almost like I'm the conduit for these stories.
I completely relate, and I talk about it all the time too, where I like even less mapped out than you, because I sat down and I was like, I don't even know how to write. I'm a writer. I've been writing my whole life, but I write poetry and I write nonfiction. I basically write like philosophical essays and, you know, articles about like current events and these types of things. I don't write fictional stories, and that is not what I do. And I don't know how. And I've always thought, you know, I don't know how other people do it. It seems like way too big of a task for me. Like, how do you map out all those things and how they connect? So I sat down and I'm like, because it's similar to you, I was like, I just feel like called to have this story come out of me, so I'm just going to try at least. And I'd sit down and I would have no idea what was going to happen at all. And I would just start writing because I'd just get images in my head of like, well, here's this new character. So what are they about? Here's this thing. Oh, I guess they went and did that. And I was like, I'd be writing and I'd be like screaming at the character. So I'm like, why are you fucking doing this, you piece of shit? And people are like, well, why didn't you just change it? I'm like, I can't.
I think the most exciting thing is discovering that you can actually write.
Yeah.
While you're writing, you're like, oh, I guess
cool.
I'm actually pretty good, or this is an awesome twist. I want to email you. I don't know if do you have a Kindle or anything?
Yeah, I have an e-reader. It's not a Kindle, but I can do EPUB or PDF.
So if after this, if I email you my first 3 books, would you read them and let me know what you think?
Oh yeah, we'll swap. I'll send you mine, you send me yours.
I'll do that. That sounds good.
It's funny too though, because this is like a totally different approach, because people are like, well, how do you write a novel? And I'm like, I know how I write a novel. I have no idea how other people write novels. Right.
It's subjective.
Everybody's
completely.
different.
Also, I initially wrote 1 book and I was like, all right, I'm done. And I showed it to my friends, Will and John. And John was like, this is great. It's going to do great. My friend Will was like, I want to know more about like the Black Pope. I want to know more about, because my first 2 books go into like the Jesuits a little bit. The second book, more hard. The Jesuits, Secrets of the Church. And I was like, and he was like, I want to know more. So I wrote 2. And then I was like, all right, I might as well turn it into a trilogy. And when I was done, he was like, keep going. And then I was like, okay. And then I went back and I realized I had like 30 pages left of notes. And I was like, I could make a series out of this.
Yeah. It's awesome that you have friends that will read it and give you feedback too, because people don't realize how valuable that is. That like, we know what we're doing and we're writing it, but like some of it is still up in our head. We didn't realize we didn't even get it out. So until someone's like, dude, what happened to like this or that? You're like, oh shit. Yeah. Well, okay. Like, or like you said, like, I want to know more about this. What's going on here? And sometimes it's stuff you like can't do because it doesn't belong in that book or you're not supposed to know or whatever. Right. But like, it's so helpful to have that.
And I find the hardest thing is not writing. The hardest thing is explaining to people what the books are about without giving anything away.
No, I have no idea how to describe my books. I'm like, I don't know, it's a thriller romance, like all about conspiracy and like Satanist dark energy and like whatever. And people are like, huh?
My 6th book, my last book in the series is called The Final Type. And it declutters what everyone thinks Satanism and Luciferianism, like true Satanism and Luciferianism, because it's not what people think it is. Now, I'm not telling you to go out and be a Satanist or a Luciferian.
Right.
What I'm telling you is that, for example, these like symbols that you see are they're not what you think they are. They're not what the conspiracy community, because me and you, we run in like similar circles.
Yeah.
You know what I'm talking about? Like with the podcasters and like, I guess we have like layover fans and stuff that like are fans of our stuff. And these people, they post the same stuff. They're like, oh, I caught another one of these. I'm like, you don't know what that really means.
Yeah.
And one day I'm going to have to come back on and I'll have to show you what all that stuff means because it's pretty interesting. It's pretty wild. I
think we're on the same page about that too. That, like I said, there's things that I would say or do and I think people would be like, that's evil or that's Illuminati. And I'm like, no, it's just a tool. So it's a tool and you can use it in whatever way you want. And, it's interesting too, though, because I don't necessarily think those people doing that know that. And I think that they get caught up in the whole darkness of it and they are evil or do become evil or are used for evil, right? So I always say this too, like those people like have taken this beautiful thing and twisted it so far out of recognition and like ruined their lives and are now ruining the world for this thing that was not even what they thought it was. They don't even understand it and they think they're so like in the know and they have all these secrets and stuff. And I'm like, you don't even understand the secrets you have.
The funny thing is that when you first become enlightened, like a couple things happen. When you first start to realize what's really going on in the world, not what the news tells you, not so much with with the conspiracy things, but like when my series is called Into the Rabbit Hole, because that's what it is. It's a rabbit hole. And when you go into the rabbit hole at first and you find your first thing that you're like, that blows your mind, 2 things happen. Number 1, there's a good chance that you're going to have a mental breakdown. Like when you realize that everything is a lie. Yeah. You have to ground yourself. You'll have a mental breakdown. The other thing that you'll realize is that if you're open to one, it usually floods in. So you kind of just believe everything. So you have to be careful because some stuff is just garbage out there, and it's disinformation.
Totally.
You know?
Yeah, well, and let's be fair, because there's tons of people who go down these rabbit holes who are, never blown away by it or like lost their footing or believed all of it in the first place. But I do see that, and I see a lot of people, especially in the past year or so, like newly, freshly awoken people who, go, like you said, have a mental breakdown and lose sort of touch with reality, and and I'm all for questioning literally everything. And I'm all for doing it at a pace and rhythm that suits your personal needs and your own personal health, But I've had people who have asked me like, oh, my son, is in your group in Facebook and he's like starting to like believe all these things that aren't even true, and he's losing his mind, and can you stop posting this stuff? And I'm like, no.
Yeah.
Like, I'm sorry, like it's harsh, I guess, but like you could maybe just have your son not go in there, or you can help him stay grounded. Like, why would I stop talking?
There's actually a really cool podcast that's in our little circle. Have you heard of Deborah Gets Red Pilled?
I have, but I haven't listened to it. I don't know anything
about
it.
So the story behind Deborah Gets Red Pilled is basically there's this kid. It's two people. There's this kid and his stepmom, or his mother-in-law, I think. It's a mother-in-law. And he's into conspiracies, and she is just fresh. She hasn't been red pilled, and every episode they just red pill the shit out of her.
And is she like buying it all, or is she like, oh, fuck you guys?
I don't know. I'm doing their show in like 3-4 weeks, so I'll let you know.
Oh, that'll be fun. Yeah. I think most of the people in my audience are probably black pilled and are like far beyond the stages of freshly waking up and buying everything. And that's part of what I think this community is really good at, is questioning everything, because, there is, like you said, so much bullshit. There's so much disinformation. There's so much that, even as far as, people will say things like, for example, you're going to get accused of this and I'm going to get accused of this, if people ever read my book in greater numbers, but of, oh, well, they're in the club. They put this stuff in their books, and that's code for like that they know, and they're in the club, and they're like Illuminati or whatever. And I'm always like, just because someone talks about something, just because they, I have a picture where my hair is like kind of like this, and someone's like, oh, why would you like signal that? And I'm like, I'm not. I have a billion pictures of myself, and one of them happened to have my hair in my eyes. Like, come on, Yeah. Where we take
that's
it like
people thinking they're
far.
in the know. That's people thinking they're in the know.
And actually being at this like surface level. We're like, you haven't thought things through.
So I think next time we do a show, I'll do the Illuminati symbols. I thought maybe I'd just plug my books real quick.
Yeah, that'd be really fun if you come back and we can go through each of the symbols, because even as many as I have known and understood, I'm sure there's so many that I've never even, thought of what does this really mean. And I know there's a lot of people in the audience who are like, ooh, tell us about the symbols. So that'll be fun. We'll have to schedule that and maybe do it beginning of April or something if you have some time around then. But yes, please tell us where people can get your books. And, also if there's anywhere else people can go to connect with you or hang out with you or, talk with you or just support you or whatever, anything you want to share.
So I'm on Twitter and Facebook at Micah Dank. You can reach out to me, friend me, follow me, ask me questions. That's fine. My books are on Amazon. But if you don't like giving money to Amazon, which I find a lot of people don't,
Right.
I also sell signed copies of my book series. The first 3 out of 6 are out right now. So I do sell signed copies. So if you reach out to me on Facebook or Twitter, we'll work something out with PayPal, and then I'll mail you a set of the books, because the books are doing well.
Yeah.
I mean, if you look at the first book, it's got like 127 reviews, and it's got like 4.8 rating.
Nice.
It's got a 4.8 rating, so
nice.
It's doing
job.
well so far.
Yeah, I know. When you told me you have more books coming out and this deal for that, I was like, this is so exciting. So that's cool that people can do that. Is there any so they should just connect with you directly through those ways if they want to buy it from you instead of Amazon and cool.
Absolutely.
Awesome. And then just tell us again the titles and the names, and if people want to go grab it from Amazon or somewhere.
It's Into the Rabbit Hole. The first one is Beneath the Veil. The second one is the sacred stones. And the third one is the secret weapon.
And I've linked to it, the Amazon page to buy it if people don't mind supporting Amazon right below here, so they can go hop over there and grab those right away. And I do also like to ask Micah, just, if you have any final thoughts or words or wisdom that you want to leave people thinking about as we close down.
I mean, I just basically, I've broken down the book of Matthew line for line in astrology. I have broken down the book of Enoch. I've broken down the book of Revelation. I only gave you 2 passages in Revelation today, but there's a lot that could be broken down. And if you're interested in seeing that or understanding that and reading it in a fun way, get it through the books.
Yes, absolutely. Well said. Well, fellow travelers of the path, that is a beautiful thing. And this has been your analog, electric, concentric dose of wisdom, according to the amazing author, Micah Dank, breaking down astrotheology for us and putting it in a fun way that we can read. And Micah, thank you so much for being here tonight and sharing with us.
I appreciate it. Thank you for having me.
Yes, finally.
Yes.
So, yes. Well, the entire universe is a template. It maps out the entirety of the mystery known as humanity. And we find we can break it down to every last star of any given constellation and find there not fiery, impersonal gases and impersonal light, but an intimate testament to our very essence. We see our travels collectively through time mapped out in stories cast in starlight, and we find that there exists nothing, not even a glimmer from a distant planet, that doesn't tell us who and what we are. If we understand the template, we can map out any path we would like and, in fact, create ourselves in any image we choose. Which aspect of self are you working on? Which pathway do you choose? Where will you end up? And until you know and are well underway toward your destination, travel well, aim for balance, and always look inside first.
I heard the Freemasons called you. Man, they at it again. And I'm out to tell the truth once more. That's right. It's on the cracking, unknown in the house. APOGZ, that's right. Hitting the stereo near you. Truth is the best thing. And it's on. Yo, I once thought that I wanted to get Denver on track, but there's something more bigger than that. Something lurking, waiting to blow this state right off the map. A hidden agenda related to September. Doves carved up on the wall next to the highway. Up in the concrete, while rolling home next to where I stay. With state's destruction, like Key Martin malfunction. In our next move, my heart's jumping in a dollar bill in the pyramid that's watching. Instead of having a capstone on top of it, they have an eye with a fast surprise while you're flossing it. Greedy niggas jocking it, politics plotting it. So who you vote for really doesn't mean shit. So save your energy from being drained by the enemy. Skull and bones of Freemasonry, envisioning dreams of them chasing me. Skull and bones of Freemasonry, envisioning dreams of them chasing me. Skull and bones of Freemasonry, secret agencies with a plan to dominate all of man. Check the records of DIA, strange murals and paintings similar to the ones next to the highway. With pyramids and flames underneath them looking like they're about to fly away. I can't be tripping, but it sounds like I'm on DIA held captive in the near future, where they won't hesitate to reinstate new laws for a bigger cause. I'm talking about established civilian concentration camps, introducing the military's labor programs. Expand your mind just a little bit, forget the little shit before you witness the belittlement of your people. Expand your mind just a little bit, forget the little shit before you witness the belittlement of your people.
Feds ain't stretching the truth, the script that he's spitting is true. Pay attention to what's going on or it might happen to you. When it's happening too, cellular communication monitor, behavior studied and controlled through chemicals bombing nerves. Thomas Murder Jesus ain't got anything to do with it. Religious cynic, where experiments cage and lace in terms of accepting limits. Things they can't explain in the sky when I'm in the Rockies. Chakra systems limited due to the voltage overhead pop. Mind control victims, slap clips and machine guns for recess. FCC will help us speak less, manipulate us through weak feel right non-fiction with the CIA trying to kill me filthy. Talking about the underground facility at DIA, no one feels that place laced with hints. Notice whenever I return home, black sun references in a new world Masonic capstone. Employ in Area 51 workers to build, and I don't mean to rant. In the face of an emergency, it doubles as a FEMA camp. The reaction solution trickery repeated through history. NORAD's listening in using technology, tracking where you piss. I might be paranoid or just facing the fact. Better watch what you say, it's another day under the Patriot Act.
The idea is to bring people to the point where they are helpless, passive, and unable to assert their own creative power to form anything else. Success for people like this is measured in terms of money, which they then translate into power.
Corruption and violations of the Constitution. Secret societies, the push for one world government. I'd like to get corruption and violations of the Constitution.
The idea is to bring people to the point where they are helpless, passive, and unable to assert their own creative power to form anything else.